So in this week's episode, our Croatia trip has come to an end, and you want to know the breakdown on the cost. So come along with us as we run through what we spent, how much it cost us, whether we'll do it again, and some other bits and pieces. So after all our planning, our Croatia trip, what did it actually cost us? You might be surprised. So for 42 days in total, we spent £5,102.16. Whoop whoop. Yeah, you might think that's expensive, but I'm going to break it all down. So I'm going to go through each section one by one, and there's quite a few things that might surprise you. Let's get into it. So one of the things that everyone says is very expensive, or you always seem to spend the most on, is fuel. So the fuel we used was £933.04. We did just over 3,500 miles, which works out roughly, according to the trip computer, 28 miles to the gallon, which I think is pretty good. So with the fuel prices, the cheapest fuel we bought was in Croatia. The most expensive fuel we bought was Switzerland. So the cheapest, and this is in UK pounds, was £1.38p. That was in Croatia. The most expensive was Switzerland, which was £2.35. So they averaged in between that all the way. Luxembourg was quite cheap. Italy was okay. Like I say, Croatia and Slovenia were about the same price. I think Slovenia was 165, and obviously it was 162 in Croatia. So just to give you a heads up how we worked it all out. The other big expense that we all have to pay is the Eurotunnel. We use the Eurotunnel, not a ferry. On this occasion, the shuttle, whatever you want to call it, I call it the Eurotunnel. That was £478 return. That includes £30 we had to pay extra because we moved our return date. The other thing that we had to pay was for Jack for his vet bills. So this includes his animal health certificate, which was £120, and the French vet, which was £34. So that comes to, with the tunnel and the vet, comes to £632. Now, tolls and vignettes. I don't really know how you pronounce that, but anyway. So Switzerland was the cheapest because we just had to buy a pass, the vignetta. I don't really know how you say it anyway. That was £25.16. I've already converted all of this into pounds, not euros. It's easier for me. That was for a 7-day pass for a 5-ton tag axle motorhome, because it does vary according to what weight and what size you are. Italy tolls weren't too bad, so this is both ways. So obviously up to Switzerland we didn't pay any tolls, so we went through Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany into Switzerland. We hadn't paid any tolls before that. Then when we got into Italy, to drive through Italy to Lake Garda and down to Venice, and then obviously through the rest of Italy into Slovenia, they came to, and on the way back, I've done it as a total there and back, so it was £75.09. In Croatia itself, driving on their motorways and paying their tolls, we spent £89.40. Slovenia, we didn't pay anything because we stayed off the toll roads. Now, this is where the biggie is. Coming home, we went through one of the tunnels, which I've done in a previous video, underneath the Alps from Italy through into France. That was €75 on its own. So the tolls coming back up through France, and I'll explain why. were £278.70. That's a total of £468.35. Now, the reason why the French tolls were so expensive, I didn't realise this because Jenny was making the payments and she wasn't looking at the machine, she was just putting the ticket in and paying it. And we were very stressed, we were trying to get back quickly. They were actually putting us through as class 4. Now, on the last toll, and I'll add the little bit of video in. Now, the only thing with the video is you can't really see the screen, but you can hear what's being said. So basically, on the second to last toll, I got out, I put the ticket in and I pressed the help button, which I've done a whole video on, but I've actually done a video with my Meta glasses of me doing this to show that it does work. You press the help button, you say in your best French possible, bonjour, le camping-car, class 2. Now, the girl that answered the help button could speak a little bit of English. She understood what I was trying to do. She pressed a couple of buttons. It changed from class 2 to from class 4 to class 2. It was a lot cheaper, like over €100 cheaper. And then from that point onwards, all the tolls were putting us through as class 2. So whether the system registered us then as class 2, I don't know. But that was probably a lot more expensive than it should have been. So I'm going to add that clip in now.
Bonjour, Sonef vous assiste dans quelques instants. Pour votre sécurité, veuillez patienter une phase effectuée de marche arrière. Cette conversation est enregistrée. Consultez notre politique de confidentialité sur le site sonef.com pour en savoir plus.
Bonjour, camping car?
Sonef vous assiste dans quelques instants.
Camping car class 2?
Okay, this one. Okay, I sent the category now.
Thank you very, very much.
Bye.
Thank you, bye-bye. So, our one night stops. So we stopped in Gravelines in France, just north of Dunkirk. That's a little car park. We've used it several times. That was £6.53. The campsite we stayed on in Belgium, which we got Axie with, was £23 and a penny. The Airs, if you want to call it that, I'm not really sure, they call it something else, in Switzerland was £17 and 9p. They were the three we used on the way down until we got to Lake Garda. On the way home, Quinto Camping Resort in Italy, that was our first stop in Italy after Croatia on the way home, was £25 and 91p. The farm overnight stop that we've shown in a previous video, area Salta in Italy, that was £17 and 9p. And we stayed on one camping car park in France, I can't pronounce the name, but that was £13 and 84p. Now the reason it's an odd amount is you've got to pay tax in France now. That included the tax. So the one night stops that we used came to £103 and 47p. Now, this is where the shocker starts. These are the campsites that we've stayed on and what they cost us, and this is where I think you're going to be probably surprised. We were 100%. So we stopped in 8 different campsites. 3 of them were on the way down, so one in Germany, 2 in Italy, sorry, and then we stayed in 4 different campsites in Croatia. So the first campsite we stopped at was Trend Camping in Germany by the Black Forest. That was 127.42. Then we stayed at Camping Sirmione on Lake Garda. That was £245.89. Then we stayed at Camping Fusia, which is the one we used for Venice. That was £88.81. Then we got into Croatia. Now, I can't pronounce the names of the campsites in Croatia, but the first one we stopped at, I'll put the name in here, was £345.62. The next campsite we stayed on was Camping Bor in Croatia. That was only £49. Then we stayed in Zadar. Now, the word looks like Frankenstein, but I'll try and put the names of the campsites in as well. That was the most expensive. So that campsite was £401.23. Shocker. From there we went to Split. The campsite we stayed in Split was £101.53. The next one was the campsite for Croatia Waterfalls. That campsite was £68.37. And then the last campsite in Croatia was By Village, the one we didn't really like. That was £245.17. So in total for the campsites and the one night stops, it comes to £1,672.97. So the last bit is food. Now, I've divided this into three. So we've got supermarkets, eating out, and drinks and bar meals. Because I can't quite remember which ones were which. But this is how it goes. So in supermarkets, so food shopping that we did, we spent £663.12. Not too bad, I don't think. Not for 42 days. And we did bring some food home with us as well. Eating out, now this surprised me because I didn't think we'd spent that much, but a couple of the meals we had were quite expensive because we had a couple of steaks to celebrate birthdays and anniversaries. We actually spent £475.23. That shocked me a little bit when I was going through it all, but I'm being honest and upfront about all of this. So drinks and bar meals. Now, sometimes when we'd stop in some of the towns, we'd have a drink at lunchtime and a you know, an ice cream or whatever. So I've added all of that together. In the afternoons, we were going to the bar, having a couple of drinks and people watching. So we actually spent in total £222.28, which comes to a grand total of £1,360.63 over 42 days. So I don't think that's that bad. So I actually made a mistake at the beginning about the actual total cost because I'd missed one of the campsites off, and when I was going through it I suddenly remembered. So I apologise for that. So the original figure is wrong. So if you make it all the way to the end, you'll see the actual figure. So the actual figure, adding that extra campsite on, comes to £5,170.53, which works out 42 days as £123.11. Now on the food as well, on the supermarket, I have been, and the fuel, I have been totally honest with this. So that's including filling the tank up in England before we left. So filling up from our house, filling up when we got to Folkestone, and on the way home we had to fill up to get home. So I've included that within it. And also the supermarket, I've included the shop we did before we left. So that was the food that we took with us. So would we do it again? Croatia. I would, but I'd be a little bit more prepared for the amount the campsites cost. You know, we've done a lot of touring in Spain and places in Portugal, and the campsites are nowhere near that expensive. Like I say, the most expensive one was the one in Zadar. Yes, it was a 5-star campsite, but there aren't really anywhere else to stay. Somebody did put a comment on one of my other videos on that video about Zadar, saying that there is a free car park in the town centre that you're allowed to stay in overnight, and it's on Park for Nights, but it isn't. It is on Park for Nights, I'm not going to deny that, but somebody else messaged me on one of my other socials who stayed there, left, didn't think anything of it, got stopped by the police because the vehicle wasn't registered as being at a campsite overnight, and there's a new rule that they've brought in Croatia. I can't remember the name of the rule, but there's a new rule that comes in. You've got to prove where you've stayed overnight. And if the police stop you, because when you go to a campsite, they register you with the government website. So your registration number is registered. You are registered as being at that campsite overnight. Because their registration number flagged up as not having been anywhere the night before, they had a €200 fine. So if you're going to Croatia and you want to try and do it for free, entirely up to you. Me personally, never going to happen. Not after hearing that. And I already knew that anyway. You know, free parking is not allowed in Croatia. You're not allowed to park in lay-bys or anything like that. So it's your choice. Would we go again? Like I say, yeah, but it was expensive compared to some of the other holidays we've done. But we did really enjoy it. The scenery is absolutely stunning in Croatia, and it is well worth the visit. Just be prepared. If you go when we went, so we went in May and June, Axi doesn't work because of the German holidays, so it can work out really expensive. So I hope you've enjoyed this breakdown of our costs. Sorry if it's gone on a little bit. So from me, Jenny, Jack, we'll see you all in the next one. And just so you know, the next one, so next week, we're doing a rally with the van club again up to Hereford, and then we're going on to the Western Motorhome show in Malvern. So I'm hoping to get the video on. It won't be on next week because we'll be at the show next week. I'll try and do a little video in between. So the week after, so not next week, the week after, will be our show review, what we thought, some of the little gadgets we're going to buy, because there are a few things that I want. A couple of reviews on a couple of things that we've done and seen. The Kadak Pro Cook, I've had an issue with that. I'll do that in that review. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed it. And you know me, I'll see you all in the next one. Ta-ra!